Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our 11th Ward Community Meeting for Lexington Homes. It is Monday, July 24th. Oh my gosh, that just took me too long to know that it was July. We're here today because there's a plan development before the Department of Planning and Development. And we have the team from Lexington Homes here. Part of this process is a community meeting that is required for them to present the plans for the development, take any questions that folks may have. We've got about 9 people on Zoom. If you have a question, you can feel free to put that in the chat or use the raise your hand function. I'll ask everybody to mute their phones or their lines while they're not speaking. And then folks here in the room, if you want to raise your hand when there's questions, the way that they'll work is we'll allow Lexington Homes to present, to give their presentation. And then we'll take questions after that's done. So with that, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves.
Sure. I'll start. My name is Nate Weinsma. I'm with Lexington Homes. We are the owner of the property and also the petitioner proposing to develop the property. We've owned it for a number of years, and I was going to look that up and forgot to, but it's probably going on 12 years now that we've owned the property. It was formerly an industrial site, and we are now coming forward with a residential proposed development of the property. We have met with the alderman's office once prior to this. We have met with the planning and development department for the city once or twice, at least a couple of meetings. And these are all what I would say preliminary or conceptual discussions of the proposed plan that our architect will kind of walk through. And our attorney is also here. She can give us details on what it is we're asking for technically from a zoning standpoint. But we have also engaged in conversation with and 1 or 2 meetings now with the Bridgeport Village Homeowners Association, and engaging them on our development concept, but also some shared infrastructure between the 2 developments. And we continue that discussion with them. And I guess before I turn it over to kind of walk through the plan, I would offer to anybody here, anyone watching online, we're happy to, this is still one of the initial stages in the process of our review and approval. And through that process, then we would hope to, if we are approved, ultimately start development of the property next spring or summer. So certainly between now and the time when we get to a city council hearing or something to that effect, happy to meet with, and we'll continue to meet with Bridgeport Village HOA and any other neighbors or neighborhood association that has representation here, and keep those conversations going, and certainly with the alderman's office. So this is not an episodic thing where we gain approval in one meeting. It is a process, and so we're happy to continue that engagement through the process. With that, I will turn it over to Katrina.
Just to mention one other thing.
Sure.
Because I think it's worth mentioning that you've met with me, you've met with DPD a couple of times, and every time I think you've gotten some feedback.
Yeah.
Where you've integrated that into updating the plan. So plans are gonna look a little different than the last ones I saw, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry,
that's
go
right.
ahead.
Yeah. And just very briefly, I'm Katrina McGuire from Johnson Coburn. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm the zoning attorney for Lexington. Sort of as Alderwoman Lee and Nate mentioned, this is sort of the outset of our process for it, because this property is in such proximity, it's adjacent to the river. Any development there has to be processed as what's called a planned development. The same way that Bridgeport Village had to be processed. That's also within a PD. So that involves ultimately an introduction at city council, hearing before the plan commission, before the committee on zoning, and then ultimately hopefully approval at the city council. And as part and parcel of that are meetings, discussions, negotiations, engagement by a multitude of city departments, including the Department of Planning and Development that we've mentioned. And there are many sort of arms. They'll look at design, they'll look at, you know, the land use, they'll look at densities, they'll look at how we're treating the river, those types of things. Chicago Department of Transportation is a very key component here, due to sort of how traffic is going to circulate out of there, our treatment of Benson, et cetera. And so we'll be meeting and continuing conversations with all those departments as well as part of the process. And with that, I turn over to the good part, which is where you see the plans.
And to introduce myself, I'm Steve Rezebeck with Papa George James Architects. I'm also joined here this evening with Elliot Schwartz from our office and Heather Faircloth, who's participating remotely. And we also have our landscape architect here, Wendy Schulenberg, with Daniel Weinbach Partners. But with that, I think we could probably jump into the first page of the other exhibit and start the process here. So the site that we're developing, it's a 6.4 acre site. And this is the zoning map, which shows that the site is currently zoned RS1, and then there's a small sliver at the north end of the site, which is zoned M23. And you can kind of see the recent townhome development at the north end of the site that has been rezoned as RT4. And then you see the Bridgeport Village planned development to our south and the neighborhood to our east, which is predominantly RT4. And RT4 is what we're proposing for our site. So next exhibit. So these are just some street views showing the existing conditions along Benson on the right-hand side. The site is currently kind of walled off with these big concrete blocks, which I believe are remnants from the former concrete mixing plant that used to operate on the site. But you can also see that the west side of Benson is largely unimproved. In this image, that would be the left side here. There's very little in the way of curb and gutter. There's no sidewalk and nothing really in the way of a landscaped parkway. We've also got a couple images looking at our riverbank conditions from the river, showing the existing conditions there. And if you scroll back down to the bottom left image there, that is the existing private alley, which is at the north end of the Bridgeport Village development, which we'll get into the significance of that on one of the next exhibits here. So we can go to the next image. So this just kind of shows an aerial overview of our site shaded in green on the bottom there, and the surrounding neighborhood to our east, and then some of the commercial and industrial uses across the river to our west. This area was taken before the townhouse development that was recently completed at the northern edge of our site was in existence, but you can kind of see that darker shaded area is right where it falls.
That's these towns.
And then we have a couple images taken from the interior of our site. So those new townhomes are on the right-hand side. And then the left-hand picture is the existing single-family homes in Bridgeport Village to the south of our site. We can go to the next. And then this just kind of shows a little bit of what's surrounding us in the neighborhood, kind of what we call a connectivity map. And the site is actually fairly well connected. We have access to the CTA and bus lines just to our north. And we obviously have commercial development, commercial and retail development along Halsted to our east and along Ashland to our west. We can go to the next one. So this is, as we've conceived our site plan for our development. So the proposal calls for the 6.5 acre site to be developed as a residential townhome development with approximately 100 townhomes, or exactly 100 townhomes is currently proposed. The vehicles would access off of Benson at a primary drive, which is aligned with 32nd Street. And you also see that our site borders the river. So there's a fairly significant development along the river edge with a multi-purpose trail and landscaping along the river edge. And then you see the townhomes that are bordering our site to the north and Bridgeport Village to our south. And then within our site, we have approximately 14,000 square feet of common open space to be shared by the residents. The site also has access for the neighbors, for the public really. There's 2 sidewalks that come in on either side of the entry drive at 32nd. And then there's a sidewalk along the north edge of the property that connects Benson to the river, and a similar sidewalk at the south edge of the property. We can go to the next image. So this is a blow up of the north half of the site. And you can see that there's a loop road that comes in from that center entry at 32nd and goes north and kind of loops around and brings you back to the center entry. The homes along Benson are fronting on Benson. So it's not, we want to integrate in with the neighborhood and be part of it. You also have interior townhomes, which are kind of focused around the common open space area. And then you have the riverfront townhomes, which have both their front doors and their garage on the side opposite the river, so that we really don't have any pavement or need to access our development from the riverfront. That's really kind of there for the enjoyment as a public amenity space. So we can go to the next image. And then on the south half of the site's a little bit narrower here. We didn't have room to do a loop road, so the road comes in from that central entry, comes along to the south, and then turns back out onto Benson. You can also see that the southernmost row of townhomes backs up to that private alley, which is shared with Bridgeport Village to our south. And Nate with Lexington has already been in discussions with the HOA there to form the arrangement for that shared alley. Within the site, we also have 22 guest parking spaces. That really came out of our first meeting with the Alderwoman, where I think we had only had 11 spaces within the site. So we've doubled that. And that's really in line with, to my knowledge, the highest requirement in the surrounding suburbs that I'm aware of, which is close to a 0.25 ratio for guest parking. We can go to the next image. So this is our landscape plan, and the landscape plan proposes 125 new trees be installed on the site along the Benson Parkway, along the riverfront development, and within the interior of our site. We are also proposing improvements of the riverbank, where we would be removing invasive species and infilling with native and adapted plantings. And of course, you have the multi-purpose trail. Also along the river, we have rain gardens to help store stormwater and relieve any pressure on the surrounding utilities within the streets.
Does the riverfront trail connect up with the existing riverfront trail?
That's a great question. Yeah, the city really envisions these trails all interconnecting. So we're taking our trail all the way to our northern property line and all the way to the south, and we'll be, working with our neighbors to make sure those connections happen. But yeah, that's the intent. So not only can you walk the length of our site, but the Bridgeport Village development to our south has a river walk as well. It stops a little bit short of our property line, so
Right.
there'll have to be an extension there.
Yeah, it looks like there's an electrical transformer. or
Right.
something.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little tricky to make
Yeah.
that connection.
Next slide.
Next slide. So these are some renderings of the development. So this is taken at the main entrance at 32nd Street along Benson. So you can see the townhomes. These are all 3-story townhomes, predominantly 3-bedroom, 2-car garage, and ranging in size from about 1,825 square feet on the low end to about 2,600 square feet on the high end. Next image. This is a view of one of the interior clusters of townhomes at that larger common open space area. And then the next image is taken along the river where you can see a little bit of what we envisioned for the riverfront development with the plantings and the trail and the rain gardens. And then here's an aerial view looking at our site in the foreground with the neighborhood to our east in the background and some of the commercial industrial development across the river to our west.
And these are all townhomes, no single family.
That's correct,
Right.
yes.
And may I ask what separates this development from the brand new townhomes? Is it a road at your northern
Right here.
border?
Yeah, the good point. I had that in my talking notes and I skipped over it. But we've specifically oriented those townhomes, their front doors and their front face of their townhomes face us.
Yes.
So we've oriented our northernmost townhomes, so
Okay.
our front door faces them. So it's not like they're gonna be looking at our garage doors. So that was
And there's a
intentional.
path to connect.
We would like to and have had at least an initial conversation with them about, they already have built their buildings, they already have a sidewalk and a ornamental fence. And we would be kind of mirroring that. So we've talked about whether or not we could integrate a shared walk face to face and not have duplicate infrastructure like they have. And we've spoken to the developer there. He's willing to engage in that conversation and try to work something out. to
And it
do
would
that.
be to get riverfront access down that street. as
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
either way, that connection from Benson to the river would happen.
Yeah.
Between those.
well. I mean, it might even be a nice place for a boat launch, I'm just saying.
all right, we can go to the next image here. So this image just shows a little bit about the materials that the townhomes would use. These are the townhomes that are along Benson, and the interior of the site where the fronts and the sides facing the streets are clad in face brick. We have projected bays with a low maintenance fiber cement panel material, covered entries. And then the other side of these townhomes, if you can, down a
Down.
little bit, where the garages are, would be predominantly fiber cement clapboard siding. And of course, the garage doors and a little cantilevered balcony deck off the kitchen area of the units. We also envision some roof decks up on the top level, the roof deck.
So you want to see the side elevation?
Yeah, that's the side elevation, so that's what you would see flanking the entrance off of Benson. So we've made a point of putting as many windows as we can accommodate. Unfortunately, in townhomes, sometimes you have a stair on one side or kitchens and bathrooms, so we've taken the opportunity to get as many windows as we can on the side. And then the next image, and I think it's the last image, are the townhomes along the river, where, as I mentioned, we have both our front door and the garage door on the same side of the unit. So that's what the fronts look like. And then the backs are also masonry facing the river, because obviously with the river walkway, we want to have that be like a front side of our unit as well and use higher quality materials. And so with that, I think we can open it up to any questions that there may be out there.
So there are a few in the chat. Let me jump to those first. Whoop, sorry, did not mean to make that big. I think that's the place. Okay. If we address this. Are you gonna build only townhouses? Yes. So we've answered that question. That's all townhouses. Parking, single or double car garages?
These are all two-car garages.
2-car garages, zoned parking. That's a question, I think, for me. I think that's yet to be determined.
I think because it's
Or it has to be, or I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
The 22 guest spaces we referred to would be dedicated guests, so they
You'd
would
have some
be
sort of marker or something else.
HOA enforced, but dedicated guest parking.
So not zone parking, because the planned development is all private property.
Yes.
So is there able, like, can the residents park on the side of the street, or are all of those streets that you're going to build no parking streets?
For the most part, the private drives are no parking.
But along Benson,
Yeah, Benson, as Steve was saying, you can see from here, the pictures at the beginning of the presentation show, that currently Benson on the west side is really not improved. It's still kind of a gravel shoulder, no curb, no parkway, no sidewalk. So we will be kind of completing that right of way improvement with a parkway, sidewalk, front doors facing the street on the north side, the side units facing the street to the south. But to the extent that parking is allowed, street parking on Benson, that wouldn't change with this
Yep.
plan development, but the improvement.
I was
of this-
talking more about the private drives that you're gonna install.
No, for the most part, they serve garages.
Okay.
The alley loaded garages.
So
Okay,
in this image that's on the screen now, really the only on-street parking we have within the development is what you see along that road that parallels the river. You can see there's 9 spaces at the north and, we've tucked in 2 and 3 parking spaces at some of the corners of the streets, and then there's 7 more spaces on the southern half.
thank you.
okay. Kara and Brian asked if the townhouse group was the one that just developed. This is a different company. I think that was answered by Heather. Thank you. This one's for me. Will a pedestrian bridge connecting the Marianos ever be built? This was the original plan for Bridgeport Village and is severely needed. That's the first time I'm actually hearing about a pedestrian bridge. So right now, there are no current plans for that. But I can certainly take it up with some folks that are in the room. I'm sure Paul would be interested in from Bridgeport Village. That was something that was originally supposed to be there. I have no information on whether or not that's.
Originally, we're gonna be 500 homes on both sides of the river, with the bridge connecting the two.
Connecting the two, right? Will there be public parking on Benson? Yeah, so along Benson, that is, I believe, that's a regular street. That's not private property, so.
Yeah, I didn't go into
Yeah.
too much detail
Yeah.
during the main presentation, but our development, will be proposing dedicating some of our land to improve the width of Benson on our side of the street so that we can have on-street parking and a landscaped parkway.
Great.
And
H-
sidewalks all along.
Right.
HOA managed by Bridgeport Village. I don't understand that question. So I think the HOA would be a different HOA.
That's
They
right.
would,
Yeah,
yes.
separate for Lexington Homes.
That's right.
Mason, are those public parking spaces that you just highlighted or private? Did we answer your question, Mason? I
I
didn't
think
see-
so. It was mostly looking at, these are all just like public roads we're dealing with or future public roads. And so the same parking laws would apply to these unless it's zoned separately with like permit parking, correct?
So I think because it's a planned development, the parking inside, because there really isn't street parking inside, there are these private spaces on the land that's owned by the Lexington Home. So the interior parking would be private. Along Benson, those would be public.
Thank you.
No problem. When will the project start and how long before it's finished? Nate, I think you started to address this earlier. Do you wanna?
Yeah,
Thank
we would hope to start development of the site sometime next spring or early summer. And we sell on a pre-sale basis. So these are all owner occupied for sale homes. So it's really dependent upon sales, the sales velocity, which is typically, I think a good ballpark is about 3 a month. So if we start vertical construction by maybe third quarter of next year, if we're selling at a pace of 3 a month or 30 to 40 a year, we can expect about a 2.5-year sellout and maybe upwards of a 3-year build out. But the development, the site development itself, which would include all of the undergrounds, the streets, the river walk, all the fencing, landscaping, most of that will all occur within the first 6 to 12 months of the development starting. And from that point on, it's all vertical construction based on a sales pace.
Great, thank you. Next question here.
Quick question,
Sure.
quick question. Just want to make sure there's no basements.
No basement.
Did everybody on the Zoom hear that? The question in the room was, will there be any basements? And the answer is that there are no basements. Okay, next question. Will development be free of any affordable housing requirements? I asked this because there seems to be some existing located on the east side of Benson. I think someone from DPD is on the call. Maybe they can address this.
I can answer.
Or you, Katrina, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so the city's affordable requirements ordinance will mandate that some portion of these units are affordable. The current requirement is 20%. We are going to be talking to the Department of Housing on exactly how that gets allocated within the development. There's an option to put a percentage on site so that some of these units would be affordable. Or then also pay into the City of Chicago Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Because the city needs those funds as well. So we'll be having those conversations with the Department of Housing as well.
Thank you. Okay, Benson, Tony's got a question. Benson narrowed south of 32nd. Is that on intention?
Yeah.
That's down here.
Yeah, what's shown on the plan is what we understand the existing conditions to be. So, yeah, once we get further south, the street does narrow below what the city now considers their
Okay.
standard pavement width. Yeah.
Question about the price range. Have you all established your range of pricing yet?
We're still working through that, but similar to the townhomes that were built to our north. We expect these to be in the 600s. To use kind of a general range, but I think most of those townhomes have sold out in the low 600s. We'll have a little more variety in our price ranges with, we have two different distinct product types. The riverfront units are larger, have a different garage orientation and a different layout than the other traditional towns. So those will range and be riverfront, so we expect those to be at a higher price. So I wouldn't be surprised to see those averaging more into the 700s, pushing 800. And those are designed really, something's going on out there. Glad I'm in here.
Really nice.
That the riverfront units are really designed in a lot of ways to live more like a single family home. Maybe not city single family, because you typically have your garage behind your house and only a small backyard. In this case, with the garage being on the street side and your living space indoor and outdoor be facing the river, each home will have a small fenced in yard. So you'll really have more of a traditional backyard orientation to the living, and they are a little larger as well.
So the question, so for the entering, it's going to be gated?
No.
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 For the car, I mean, like not for the pedestrians.
No.
No, the gates are for the units themselves only,
The
right?
gate is
The
for the
fence.
units, because I saw some fence.
Yeah, so on those that back up to the
to the
river walk,
Yeah,
that river walk
Has to be publicly accessible.
is all public easement, publicly accessible. And it's about, in total, I think it's almost an acre and a half from end to end. So those townhomes that will back to that easement area will have a fenced in yard, private yard. Everything beyond that, between their fence and the river, is the public access easement. And whether or not those have a gate on the back to go straight to the river walk, I don't know. That's up to sales and marketing to decide, but they will definitely have a fence.
yes, Matt, go ahead.
I have a question just about the river walks. I'll just run through it. it's kind of hard to see, it's a 60-foot setback. Or
It is.
Yeah.
and then for the row of townhomes north of you. Do you guys know who owns that small slip that's directly on the river? Is
On
it
the
the same
river.
owner or?
It's about, I think it's about 100 by 100.
100 feet deep,
Foot
we know that
area.
for sure.
It was improved by the developer. I am unclear on whether or not the HOA will be in ownership of that or under what standards it was built, but my assumption is that will end up in the ownership and control of the HOA for that, for those 18 units, I think it was, 3 6-unit buildings.
Yeah, I see that the route goes through, assuming that there's an opportunity to extend it when more sites are developed, so. Just to say that any mistakes that are made with that developer, it'd be great to see the all connect together.
Sure.
One final question, and then I'm gonna run out, since the cops just passed. With the traffic plan, looking like most of the traffic's in coming out on 32nd, I noticed that street is color graded, is there? I would expect that a lot of the community members that are going to use the Riverwalk are maybe going to come in through that street. Are there any raised crosswalks or anything like that to kind of help with pedestrian access to the Riverwalk?
Yeah, there will be, if you scroll to the center drive, you can see crossing the road that parallels the river. We've kind of implied some kind of a paver pattern in the roadways so that it's clear that there's a pedestrian crossing there. But, we don't envision there being a lot of interior traffic here, so, but it is a nice feature just to make sure that there's an obvious path and connection for the public to get to the riverfront.
So I think the main concern is just that if a lot of the traffic is going to be using the street. If there's no conflict between people who may be walking towards it, so signage, raised crosswalks, things like that.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the questions in the chat. Will there be road closures on Benson during development? I don't know that we have an answer for that at this point.
I wouldn't envision a closure of the road, but certainly when we're completing the public improvement to the west side and expanding the road, as Steve said, we're dedicating part of our property to the new road. So when we build that, there'll definitely be construction on the west half. But typically we keep an open, at least single lane, if not two-way traffic lane while we're under construction.
Great, thanks for that. Another question for me. There's no existing sidewalk on Benson south of 32nd Street on the east side, so if you could plan some improvements, that'd be great. I think we're gonna make sure that it's part of this plan development, are the additional improvements to the streets and sidewalks and curbs in and around the development area. So I think that's an affirmative on that one, Tony. What else do we have? Maybe 2 more questions here. Nope, agreement on the sidewalks. How many stories, any basement? We already answered that. 3 stories, no basement. 2-car garages. Will the streetlights contribute to light pollution like the Bridgeport Village development, or will the lights be pointed down and capped?
We will have full cutoff light fixtures to, avoid the night sky issues that older light fixtures created.
Great, thank you. Any other questions in the room, on the chat?
This is unrelated to you guys, but any idea what's happening north of the townhomes?
You should ask me that.
Yeah.
There's a contract on the sale of that property right now. I cannot talk about it right now. But it will most certainly be an improvement and something that I think the community will benefit from.
More
I'll leave that there.
residential?
Pickleball court.
That's most- There's all kinds of noise issues with pickleball. potentially some, but that, that's all I can see about it. I'm sorry. I'm excited about the project, though. I'll put it to you that way.
Is the site tainted? I mean, you need to do remediation.
We don't use the word tainted. I think from a technical perspective, it could be considered blighted. Because of the condition and the state of it being undeveloped for as long as it's been. Most of what I would refer to as needing remediation on the site is mostly concrete in nature. Whatever facilities were built there previously, they took the buildings down, but the foundations are still all in place. And that's most of what you see is concrete slab. But because these were industrial buildings, these are not 4-inch slabs. These are significant concrete slabs. The environmental contamination that requires remediation is relatively small in comparison to the physical remediation that we need to do. So, and that will, that, when I talk about the kind of development schedule, building schedule, if we were to have our approvals today and permits in hand, just that portion of the site preparation that would be mostly the clearing, demolition and removal of the foundations, remediation would take at least 60 days, 90 days. So really, before we're even putting sanitary sewer and water and building roads, we've got a lot of work to do before we can even do that.
Do you know what businesses have been in that property?
I think it was one of the big concrete companies, Prairie. You see their trucks around, and this was I think they referred to it as a batch plant. So they may have barged in gypsum and other material for mixing the concrete, but that's what they built on site, where it was the concrete material, and then they trucked it in and out. So I imagine in the day, this would have been nonstop concrete trucks up and down Benson to Archer and over
Or
to,
barge traffic down the road.
oh gosh, yeah,
Do
barge
you know when it
traffic.
shut down?
No, I don't.
So part of that, what else was there?
I don't know. Before that, oh, actually, we talked about this, didn't we? Was there, I think the title report showed,
Railroad lines. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, the Norfolk Southern has
Yeah.
some.
Norfolk
right of way over
Southern
there.
has some right of way, so there was a train track there. You can still see the remnants of it kind of at the north end by those new townhomes. But I think the Armor Company was maybe in the title reports to some degree for a portion of the property, so.
The packing.
Yeah, Armor was meat packing and distribution, and so something along those lines probably at one time. Turn of the century.
We got a couple other questions in the chat. I'll ask those and then I'll jump into mine. With the influx of families, will Lexington Homes advocate with the Alderwoman for the development of the near South Public High School? I think I'm not gonna answer for you, but I think you're attracting a
Yeah.
clientele that has families and are gonna wanna lay down roots. High school is a big issue for us here, so any help and support that you'd be willing to give is obviously welcome. On that
Yeah.
front, I think it'd be really important to, obviously for your potential clients too, that are gonna be purchasing homes. Whether or not there's a good high school in the area.
I didn't realize is that an initiative that's been discussed.
There's a proposal before the Chicago Public Schools right now. There was some land that was essentially leased from CHA at 24th and State. That this area would be included in the enrollment area. That is a big influx of families. So thanks for the question, Kara and Brian. With the increase in home and population, does that bring any redistricting for schools into question for this development possibly baked into a future district population? I don't know how to answer that question, Michael. I know, so we're on the subject of schools. That's a question I think for CPS. Their boundaries, I don't think get redrawn all that often. at this point. I believe that the school that this area is districted to in terms of neighborhood high school probably be either Tilden or Kelly. Will be the nearest high schools. But I'll make a note of that so I can ask CPS that exact question.
I'm actually headed to the board meeting on Wednesday to stand as an observer, and I can make a little note. We have a speaker speaking in support of the near South High School. And they could possibly say, you know, there's a projected another 200 homes going into Bridgeport. So we already have that demonstrated need for
Yep.
the near South school.
For 100.
That's great. Thanks for that, Kara. I appreciate that. I have a question about accessibility. How many of the units are going to be ADA compliant, accessible? Are there plans for that?
There are, we hope to have that a little more clarified when we meet with Department of Housing, but our understanding is any on-site affordable units that are provided would have to be accessible. And then above and beyond that, I think, I know that a plan development requires for townhome developments that, and Heather, you probably know this better than I, it's either 10 or 20% of the units be,
Yeah, it's
Heather
10%.
knows
10%.
10%. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other questions for the folks at Lexington? I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
And
time.
having this conversation. And appreciate that you're open to further.
Absolutely.
We'll be publishing this on our 11th Ward YouTube channel. For anybody that missed it, they can go back and take a look at it. And if we get questions here, we'll be happy to pass those along. Somebody just
Oh,
got into the chat.
There was a couple more questions here. There
Oh,
was one.
Sorry.
No, that's
I
okay.
missed it.
There's one from Michael Edwards at 7:41 about pre-sales, and then right
Oh,
after
sorry, I
that.
missed that.
No, that's okay. I had a question about allowing Airbnb rentals and things like that.
Sorry, I totally missed that, Kara. Thank you for stopping me. So you want to take the pre-sale question first?
What was
Well-
the question? On pre-sale.
All right, I'm gonna try to go back up here to see what I missed.
Are saying that they think that sell it out 2.5 to 3 years. So in 2.5 to 3. So
741.
741. Here we go.
Oh, Mariano's.
Oh, no, during pre-sales, is there any enforcement for consistency, or will potential owners have liberties to combine or amend anticipated designs?
Not much. It's pretty consistent and the plans are pretty locked in. We typically offer a pretty wide range of finishes. But the options that would involve moving of walls and things like that are predetermined. So once we have pre-sold, we will always what I call spec some units. So we will, if we sell, if we start the project, we're gonna build a building that our model homes will be in. So if that's a 6-unit building, but only 2 of them are gonna be models, we'll predetermine the first 4 and start the building. So those are kind of locked in. The next building, even if we've only pre-sold 3 of them, we'll start the whole building of 6 and predetermine 3 out of the 6, but the other 3, the owners can choose their floor plans, but they are pretty consistently predetermined, or they're a very limited set of structural changes, but a lot of opportunities for multiple different finishes and materials you can choose and select for your unit finishes. If that answers the question.
Then the other question here is, and this may be too early to know, will the HOA of Lexington Homes allow short-term rentals like Airbnb?
I'm not sure. I'll check that, but I don't think our HOAs typically allow for that.
That'd be great if they didn't.
We don't,
And as a part of a PD too, that would have to be set out specifically as a permitted use.
Okay, Got it.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Rendering showing Riverwalk to be possibly concrete is the goal to change the look of the south end. Josh, if you're on the line, if you want to say more about your question.
Yeah, I'm here. So it's paved brick on the south end leading north. And I'm actually the last house on the corner. So I was just curious. I know there's still a lot of plans to be done regarding the pathway, but is the overall goal to kind of make that the transition from with a new look for the Riverwalk from the older subdivision to this new subdivision?
Yes, I think is the answer, but the longer answer is any portion that might be built on or as part of the common area of Bridgeport Village would be probably to some degree dictated by the HOA. And I would assume would be a matching material to Bridgeport Village, but then transitioning to concrete on our site.
So the alleyway, pretty much.
Wendy, is concrete what the
Yes.
city typically wants to see for the Riverwalks?
Safety and surface of whatever pavers can become uneven. So for bikes and for pedestrians, it's better to have a consistent surface.
Right.
So the concrete is the,
As opposed to like asphalt. Yeah.
right,
Okay,
yeah, concrete is more long-term than it.
sure.
Great, and then hopefully the final question, unless I missed anything else further up, please chime in if I did. Will the sales be offered in multiple languages and support for non-English speakers?
Absolutely.
Can't imagine you want to leave anything on the table.
No.
I have one last question, then I'll shut up.
No, ask away.
Is it possible that you guys are gonna go with the modular house or would you be doing conventional stick built?
Conventional,
Okay,
all conventional construction. We don't do any modular.
okay. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you.
You bet.
Well, if there's no more questions in the room or on the Zoom, we'll go ahead and end tonight's meeting. Like, as I said, we will be sharing this on our 11th Ward YouTube channel. We'll pass along any other questions. If anybody, residents, if you've got questions, please feel free to send those through to the ward office and we'll make sure we relay those to Lexington Homes. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch with the alderwoman too, as we continue fine tune our conversations with CPD and housing and CDOT and all of that, so that you're
Yeah.
to speed. I mean, at this point, we haven't filed our application. I think our goal would be to try to file it for September intro.
Oh.
When the next city council meeting is, and then obviously there's
Yeah.
no time to
Let me
post the
know.
plan commission.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Will do.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.